Okay, I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Thank you all for joining us. We also have Chris Jones on the phone. First thing, any adjustments to the agenda?
Did you want to make a presentation?
We don't have time for that,
Of course we do.
especially if we're gonna have time for the town planner. I don't know if y'all got a chance.
I'll be brief.
Yeah,
Doesn't mean we will.
honestly, I would prefer if y'all would have a little bit until the next meeting to just look over it. It became very deep very quickly, and every source that I put in there, we read through top to bottom to do our best.
Well, in all
So-
candor, this may be our last meeting.
Really?
So, I mean, it's to be discussed, and we have to have a vote, but,
Why would this be our last meeting?
well, because I might want to make a motion that this is our last meeting.
Well, let's stick to any adjustments to the agenda. Just anything that we want to add to the agenda right now.
Even if you decide not to, I think as a placeholder, you should at least put yourself in as a placeholder to make it. You can always bow out and not do it.
I guess so then.
Okay, so you want to add under others, under old business, Will specifically?
Sure.
And I think he should be in some new material. I would prefer that he goes first.
Put me on the spot, eh?
Only if you like.
Not really, but here we are.
Do we have minutes from the last meeting?
So Chaz is the
Oh,
secretary.
he was, yeah.
And I haven't received anything from him.
Okay.
So we have the recording,
Oh.
because it was
right.
recorded. So we
So-
can go and look back on that.
Thank you.
And,
Which is also true for tonight.
yes,
Okay.
indeed. Okay. Citizen comments?
Is this the last meeting that you're meeting? Is that what I just heard?
We do not have any plans right now either way, so we'll probably be talking about it during this meeting.
Okay, because I seem to remember from last meeting, there was a recommendation due to the select board June, April-ish?
The recommendation was actually originally due to the select board last August, so
So I missed that.
we had an
So
extension,
did we.
and an extension, and another extension, so
Okay.
it's flexible right now, as you can obviously tell.
We
Yeah.
don't stand on ceremony here.
No, we certainly don't. We certainly don't. Okay, so any other citizen comments? Okay, so new business. Max, you're up.
All right. 5:35. Let's see how fast this can go. So last Tuesday, some context. So last July, the Maine State Legislature approved Amendment LD 1539, which provided home rule authority or the opt-in feature for a municipality for medical marijuana-related businesses, retail stores, dispensaries, cultivation facilities and such. On December 13th, it went into effect, 90 days after the second session ended. And so any language in our ordinance that doesn't allow it is essentially us saying we are not allowing a retail medical marijuana business in town. Now, this does not mean a home care giver, someone who operates out of their own home. They are still allowed to operate as usual, no restriction from us. That's even a part in the first page, I believe. However, there was some concern raised by some people who believe that we should amend the language in the ordinance, since that's the third page that I gave you, since it does mention medical marijuana dispensary and cultivation facility.
This one right here.
Yes. That's the only language we have regarding medical marijuana in town. That was put in, I believe, back in 2012, when it was
Wow.
believed
2012.
that when it was
This one
believed
right
that the Maine Medical Use of Marijuana Act had language that forced the town to include that language.
So is that 2B that you're talking about? Or is that the whole thing? It's the whole thing, actually?
It's the whole thing, yeah.
Okay.
Now, that language has also been removed from because of LD 1539. However, because we have it on our books, it can be interpreted as us opting in to allow a medical marijuana dispensary and cultivation facility.
But I thought we were supposed to just be dealing with recreational marijuana.
The reason I wanted to bring it up tonight is because, as the marijuana committee, sort of the only committee in town talking about marijuana in general, I love just going as fast as saying marijuana, marijuana, marijuana as much as I can now. I wanted to just keep people in the loop about this and
Okay.
have this as a public discussion because the select board has tasked me to write up a moratorium for them.
Oh, right,
And
that
if
was
there-
in the paper.
Yes, and if there were any suggestions from either this committee or the public or just anyone in general about looking at it and amending it, then that's certainly something I'm open to. I was primarily tasked with dispensaries and cultivation facilities since that's the only thing on our books and the only thing that is considered allowed in town or permitted.
Or was, depending upon, yeah.
Yeah, it's the
Right.
only thing that the town has a approval process for, or permits in town, technically.
So because there was pre-existing language in the
Yes.
town ordinances
Yes.
that said, under these criteria,
Yes.
theoretically, a dispensary or a cultivation facility could be allowed.
Yes.
And because of 1539 requiring towns to opt in to, well, not requiring, but if you're gonna allow medical marijuana facilities, you need to opt in.
Yes.
So that's why we need to have the moratorium so that
Yes.
people can interpret this as opting in. This
Ye-
pre-existing language
Yes.
is opting in. Okay.
The moratorium is supposed to sort of freeze any approval if there was someone who wanted to come forward and do it, so that in case we want to just update the language.
So
or-
can you help me, one thing I don't understand is the medical marijuana dispensary.
Mhm.
Now, we have one of our board, committee
Caregiver.
members, Chaz, works at Highbrow. Is that considered a dispensary?
That is a retail medical marijuana
That's just a
store.
retail medical marijuana store?
Correct.
Okay, which is different from.
Right now, there's 8 of them in the state. The closest one to us is in Bath.
Yep.
But this just says dispensaries and cultivation facilities.
Yep.
This doesn't say,
I actually, in the, on the second page of the proposed moratorium, there's actually definitions from the main legislation that explains the difference between the two of a
Okay.
registered dispensary and a caregiver.
okay, but our current
Yes.
ordinance does not say anything about
The difference between the
a
two.
retail, right, it
The
does not.
concept didn't exist at the time.
It did not exist at the time.
Yes.
There we go.
It's kind of like why we've had to approve some retail caregivers this past summer because the state had a difference in definitions, but we didn't. We only had something for dispensary, but we didn't have anything for a retail caregiver.
Okay.
So in the old medical marijuana
Got it.
legislation, there was no such thing as a registered caregiver storefront.
Mhm.
But each of Maine's 8 public health districts was allowed one dispensary, which was a retail location designed to serve a higher volume of patients.
And have they all been put into being? Are they all?
Yes.
There's one that has not in Fort Kent.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure that's where it is.
We don't have to worry about that.
Exactly.
But with 1539, they expanded it
To
to
14, I
allow
believe.
14 across
Oh.
the state.
Okay.
So theoretically, we could get a
One in
second
each
one.
county?
Yeah, well,
Yes.
there's 16 counties, but yeah, almost.
Yeah.
So theoretically, we could have one, and so that's where this gets a little.
So has there been any
Fascinating.
comments from like out of town people or out of state people about this kind of change? Not just in our town, but in other towns?
Just changing the language. I mean, some towns have certainly passed some prohibitive measures so to not allow medical marijuana businesses, and mostly recreational. In terms of what we're doing exactly, I don't think I have any numbers on that.
The history of this land use was, given that they felt there was an open-ended exposure to the dispensary, it was trying to protect the town to the extent it could, with at least being in the commercial zone in Route 1. Some towns never did anything land use, so they in effect are in a way better position because it's totally opt-in. This has created a legal ambiguity that probably you could say, well, the new law overcomes what the town did, and they could say, no, the land use overcomes the it becomes a de facto opt-in.
Yeah.
And that's a problem, because then you're talking about a judicial adjudication of these conflicts.
Yes, and that's why the moratorium is in place, or the moratorium was asked to be put in place so that if the town would like to do a traditional opt-in right now, this would be its case.
Okay, I think we can keep going. I'm sure there was more you wanted, was there more you wanted?
I mean,
to say?
so far I've just heard of, I mean, one, Bob Butler during the meeting said that one thing that definitely has to happen is addressing some errors in it. Like I made some circles in the actual text. For example, selling and storage shall be conducted in fours and shall not be visible from outside. And then this E requirement, you'll notice that the last two lines are repeated on the exact same, on the next page.
Oh, typo.
Very minor stuff, but, yeah. So, I'm gonna just listen to what the select board wants to do for a moratorium, whether it's just updating the language or strict prohibition and taking it all out.
So do we currently have 3 storefronts or 4 in Waldeboro?
3.
Okay. Why did I think there was 4?
I think there's, I'm trying to think.
Because I thought the vape shop was gonna have something. Or at
Vape
least-
shop should not be selling marijuana.
No, in the other half of the
The
building.
other half is a retail storefront. They were approved in August.
They
So
just
then
haven't
we have
opened up
4,
yet, so
right?
that would be,
Isn't that 4?
Who would highbrow, cider,
Cider Hill.
the vape shop? Who would the fourth be?
I guess that's it.
yeah,
3.
okay, all right.
Yeah. And this would not affect them at all, or
Yeah,
yeah.
and but because the town hasn't yet opted in, no new storefronts can
Correct.
apply right now,
If-
okay.
If highbrow was to say we want to open up a second shop somewhere in town, I would say the town is not opted in.
Okay.
Okay.
So you want the committee to just weigh in, or
If-
any thoughts or
if there are any
concerns or
thoughts.
questions?
If there are any thoughts, I'm open to hearing them.
So is the idea that the ordinance language will change after, during the time of the moratorium?
Yes.
Okay,
What the language should be directed towards is up for
discussion.
discussion, yes. I'm gonna,
When is the next
When is
moratorium
that
vote?
public discussion going to be?
depends how many questions I'll be asked. I keep forgetting you're on the phone, Chris.
It's okay.
No, it's all right. You can leave her there. I am supposed to present this to the select board on Tuesday, next Tuesday.
Okay,
Whether they accept the language as I have is up to them. If not, then it's whenever the select board meets. So if not next Tuesday, it would be 2 Tuesdays from then, and then so on, so on.
okay.
How long is the moratorium currently for, or when does it expire?
The moratorium will last 180 days, so it would last until after a town vote is done in June.
And then they would just be voting to extend it or not?
Correct.
Right.
It is under the assumption that with this moratorium, we shouldn't have to extend it since we will hopefully have language to put to the voters by then.
Okay. And it all depends on citizen vote?
Correct. This will not be a select board vote.
So
Did you
they
move to
vote on the
Waldeboro?
moratorium.
Correct.
Did I,
Okay.
currently?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still living in Wiscasset
Oh.
and working in Waldeboro.
Uh-huh.
Working on getting a loan right now to try to put in a foundation and move back.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Good. So without seeing 1539, it's a little difficult, isn't it, to really read this? Or is everything that's in 1539?
Well, that's what the first page is supposed to try and be a good, quick summary of, because there's a lot of things that happened in those. There were 2 amendments that happened. LD 1539 is just the primary focus of it all.
So are there restrictions on owners? There are, but that's not in here.
What do you mean by
Who an owner
Could be.
could be?
Yeah, there's,
for a dispensary?
yeah, for any,
Marijuana care?
oh, I don't know about medical. Is there,
So-
I know for recreational, they have to be main,
No felony convictions?
correct, yep.
I believe
drug-related felony convictions.
That's what I-
Pedophiles can do it, but
Right. Just drug-related. So in other words, you could be convicted murder and you could, so whatever.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. That came up in a argument today. I
Really?
think in one of the, not about
This-
that, but it was about felons being allowed to do certain things. I think it's in the state of Florida.
voting.
Voting was
Well,
one
that's
thing.
more votes. I mean,
Yeah.
who is a felon going to vote for? A liberal or a conservative?
Depends on
Depends on the,
Well,
depends on the
politics
state.
means. A lot of felons in Congress right now.
Yeah.
I want to focus on this moratorium,
Oh, okay.
especially while we're
Sorry.
recording.
Welcome to the meeting.
So, okay, so we could.
But I don't know
we
about
could make
medical. Does it
make
have
some
requirements
suggested
for owners
changes
for
to
the
you
medical
between
too?
now and Tuesday
requirement.
morning.
And the ownership,
Is what
the
you're saying.
50,
Okay.
or
Yep.
the main.
No
based
guarantee that
main
if you
resident.
tell me something on
Technically.
I understand.
But that's
Friday,
very
that it'll
loose.
be on the same
Yep.
document that I
How you
showed to
claim
the select
residency
board.
and all. Yeah.
Thank
Half
you.
of our citizens have residency.
Well, thanks.
Thank
That's
you
great.
very
Did you have a
Thank you very
question?
much.
Where's
I
the
know.
opt-out on
When
this?
Chris piped up. Did you have a question
The
about this?
opt-out.
No, I already asked.
Oh, okay.
Deadlines.
It's not on this, this is just the moratorium.
And I would be holding a public meeting sometime in March with the language, just for anyone in Waldeboro. I'll make sure it's in the paper and all that, because it has to be submitted by, I believe, the beginning of April, since that's to make the absentee ballot deadline. So this would be worked on between whenever the select board wants it to April. All right.
Okay, any other comments or questions for Max? Chris?
I'm thinking. I guess not. No,
Okay.
not at this time.
Okay.
Anything from the public?
Nope.
15 minutes. I say I did a good job.
Yeah,
Yep, thank you
definitely.
very
Thank
much,
you.
Max.
Thanks for the update. Okay, so next on the agenda, the status of the committee chair. So I wanted to share with all of you that I just submitted my resignation from the committee to the town manager a few minutes ago before the meeting. I can't participate anymore for personal reasons and for health reasons. But I have very much appreciated the opportunity to meet all of you, to work with all of you over the last year and a half. And
Thank you.
yeah.
Are you gonna stay working with Healthy Kids?
Yeah, I'm still in my
Oh,
and I'm
good.
still in my role professionally,
Good.
and I left my information with Julie, and I'm happy to provide technical assistance in anything that I can
Uh-huh.
in that capacity. But just cannot continue on the committee, so.
Well, you've been a wonderful facilitator. Thank you, Kate, for all your time.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, my pleasure.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'll stay till the end of this meeting, but we will need to, before it adjourns, come up with next steps, so. With that, we can go on to old business. Sound good? Okay, so Freeman or Will or Freeman?
Well,
How do you want to do it?
Honestly, I don't necessarily want to waste our time.
Oh, thank you.
We came up with a report and we would like for it to be sourced to wherever we're going to present this report, saved in with all of that. But as far as specific presentation with committee members, it doesn't really seem like any specific mindsets are going to be changed other than just, I'm obviously not a good public presenter. It's just going to be more stress for me.
You did great.
But my biggest question, if anything, is I'd just like to ask the fellow committee members, what do we see as the scope of the necessity of this board?
And I did pose that question to the town manager to see if we could get something in writing, but I haven't seen anything
Okay.
yet, so.
My understanding, or I guess I'd like to hear from y'all first then. Why are we even doing this?
could I make a suggestion? Why don't we put that next steps? Because that's really the whole thing. It's a next steps question and.
Sure.
But if you want to talk about this 28 pages, which has a lot of documentation, I'd be interested in hearing it.
I mean, it speaks for itself. I hope you take the time, I hope all of you
Okay.
take the time to actually look through it. I know my girlfriend alone spent 60+ hours on it. I myself, over the past
bet.
month and a half, have spent 20+ hours on it in addition. We tried to do our best without just beating down one door to be as even-handed to it as possible. Everything in it is cited, citable. We try to include minimal opinion other than using it for transitional areas. Yeah, so we tried to be as comprehensive as possible. And in the report, I'd say that the most important part that I could point to is the final portion of it, because we tried to go beyond what had already been done in the other report and bring attention to, like, our, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name right now.
Max.
Like Max has said, this is going to come down to a citizen vote. And at the end of the day, I don't see it being up to us to choose whether or not this happens. It's more up to us to choose how it happens. And that's why we tried to include what we could at the end of the report to bring up things that really should be paid attention to. Contaminants, environmental impact, conventional versus organic farming impacts. And, because we could just get lost in fighting back and forth over data that hasn't even been created yet.
Yeah, there's several, there's a lot of data coming out from UC Davis in California. Soil and water impacts from the fish and wildlife, new data, and it's coming, coming all the time as legal grows are studied. There's a lot of data out there on the illegal grows, which are highly toxic, and contamination is rampant. But there's more and more data that's coming out. As they can study legal grows. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, because, technically, come June, the town could come and vote, and it's done. And then we have no plan for how the town is going to implement what the citizens voted on.
Well, I do appreciate the time and the effort that you put into creating that, Will. I think, I haven't obviously had the chance to read all of it,
course.
but I scanned through it and it was, quite comprehensive, so I do appreciate the time that you've put into it.
Yes, thank you.
Freeman?
I'll try to be brief. Do handouts here. This is an addendum. Thank you. To what you previously saw.
It's gone.
and I'll try to go through it very, very briefly. There's the first is an article in the New York Times, which is actually interesting because the Times is actually,
Do you have an extra? For our public?
Here.
Why don't you- oh, okay. Oh, they've got one.
It just seemed like he had extra.
Oh, well, fine, thanks.
the Times, which is actually favorable to legalization, nonetheless has an article about Northern California, Santa Barbara County, where the neighbors are complaining about the smell of the marijuana. It's called the skunk. The title is Dead Skunk Stench. I'm aware in Pennsylvania of how mushroom farms have a tremendous odor and how they are very, very objectionable. The second is page 32, is an essay by Alex Berenson in the Wall Street Journal. Marijuana is more dangerous than you think. He talks about it from standpoints of psychosis, et cetera. Again, I want to be brief. It's an article there, you can read it. The third is Coloradoans, this is by Denver Coast, which again is favorable to marijuana, but it's about drug overdoses. And then finally, we had a discussion about Colorado highway data. So what I did was, I used 214 as a base, and it happened to be the Colorado Department of Transportation says that fatalities are 29%. I know you have different data, but this is from them. And then from 2002 to 14, traffic-related fatalities actually had dropped 34%. But then what I did was, you had talked about the increase in tourists, which I'll get to, but the mileage on the Federal Highway Administration's data sheet shows that it went from 14 million to 1570. You see the number, a 9% increase for rural miles, and then the urban miles went up again about 9%. The problem with tourists is a tourist, like I remember I was in Colorado for 3 days, a tourist is basically there for 3, 4, 5 days. And therefore, you have to actually adjust the raw number down by a factor. You have to divide it by 50 or 48 weeks. And so with Colorado, it's 5-6 million people, and you have, let's say, the baseline of 25 million tourists, whatever, and you go by 5 million, but the 5 million has to be divided by 48 weeks. And then you have a normalization, and only has really 100,000 full-time people, and therefore that's roughly 2% of the population. So the tourism really doesn't account for hardly any of the increase that you would expect from the fatalities, because it has to be adjusted by how little time a tourist is actually in the state.
Could I, something I don't understand what you said at the beginning, and it was, I think, I have not read Will's report, but I think you were trying to distinguish Will's report from what you had in
Yes.
terms of from 2002 to 2014, the number of traffic-related fatalities in Colorado.
Dropped by 34%.
So they actually did drop.
Right, and then
But-
from 2014 to now, they
Yes.
went up by 29%.
And is Will, where is there
I have
just
not,
difference?
his
I think it was
numbers.
was it in
to
Chaz's
here,
We
report or
actually
was
took
it
the
in?
time to find all the data,
I can't swear these numbers.
state by state. Oh, please,
No,
you
let's
have a
just,
phone.
can we
Go
just
for it.
talk about Colorado?
Mhm.
Okay.
Well,
so-
this is based on the study that Freeman's referencing.
Oh, okay, okay,
That's why we did that.
okay.
That's state by state and the comparison states that they chose to use.
So is this saying, in fact, fatalities were up by 10% from 15 to 16?
Yes.
They were.
But if you look across the entirety, it's inconsistent. There's nothing but inconsistencies, and everybody who has reviewed that study has said that they do not take account for population increases.
Well,
for
things
one.
don't move in a straight line anyway.
Exactly, exactly. And that they also, the control states that they use as comparisons have different conditions of roads, different climatic conditions.
Okay, but that's in my presentation, why don't we get involved in this in detail, but since you raised it, I'll be blunt. First, we have data now that goes beyond those years. We have data that goes actually to 17. We have Federal Highway Administration miles driven, And that's the point, is it's miles driven is what matters. If people drive less miles, then the fatality rate would you have to normalize with that. If they drive more, you have to change it. The miles driven have only gone up by 9% rural and 9% urban. And that's your baseline, is the Federal Highway Administration numbers of miles driven. And these are very, very good numbers, and they're accepted across everybody that you can read in their reports, which are voluminous. And the point is that the fatalities have increased, and for the point, 16 is not a good base, 17 they went up even higher. So you have to go to the most relevant numbers, and now they reported 18 numbers. So I think what's relevant is having those last 2 years, because taking the very first year of marijuana isn't as good as taking the 3 years. And when you take the 3 years, it's up by 29%. I don't want to, we don't want to get lost in data in this thing. I'm just telling you that your numbers don't square with mine. I think I can support these numbers, but I don't want to delay this meeting by that.
Okay.
So what I'd like to do is simply say that obviously we have, in your side, a comprehensive, your position. We have ours, this plus what we presented. I think they're entirely different. I don't know that we would ever square them, though I've only seen this morning, so I want to research it. But, you know, even researching the Federal Highway Administration took me like 3-4 hours to really find this data, normalize it, dig with it, look at your thing about tourists, what the normalization of tourists. It gets very complicated. What I would like to do, with Chairman's permission, is to move into really next steps. What are we going to do? And I'll start, since I presented that I think that we're at the end of this.
Well, before we do that, I do
Yes.
want to invite Chris, Saran, and Andy if they have any final comments on the report development before we go to next steps.
I would like to, and I've been remiss, but I would like to. I don't know how these 2 reports are going to be reported to if we'll just give them to the select board and they will read them over and then they'll have questions or whatever, but I would like to do either a presentation or, it won't be very comprehensive, but an environmental impact, because as I'm reading more and more, there's a lot of environmental impacts from any cultivation, and this is, this is a new type of cultivation, would be to maintain indoors and out. The air quality. York has already experienced, I think, last year, some complaints about the skunk weed smell being pretty toxic to them. Anyway, so I'd like to kind of do it, because that doesn't seem to be something that, we've really been focusing on the direct impact to humans, but not to the environment. So I guess what I'm saying is, I'd like to go in that direction. I think it's something we haven't really covered.
So Chris, are you saying that you're going to make some kind of presentation to the select board also?
Yes, probably as a private citizen. I mean, I'm on the Conservation Commission.
Uh-huh.
Not representing, the Conservation Commission or this committee, but just I plan on doing it just as a citizen, or if somebody on the committee wants to help.
I would help you with
into
that,
it.
Chris. This is Will.
Yeah, Will, you have mentioned, and I do have a lot of questions about the organic growing and the viability of making $1 on organically growing it. Yeah, that would be interesting. We can compare and contrast what we find.
How long, when is your resignation effective?
At the end of the meeting.
Oh, okay. Got it.
If there are any next steps I can help with, I can do that. but,
Okay.
Are there any other comments, or we get the next steps?
Yes.
I'd like to weigh in on the smell thing. The problem with the smell is, I agree. I wouldn't want to live next to it, or anywhere near it. The smell itself, but they sell filters. They can be mandated into. They sell filters that are huge, that can be mandated into the laws that will completely. The exhaust from marijuana grow, once you get the smell of it, is pure oxygen. That's what it is. It's pure oxygen. It's a plant. Plant breathes in carbon dioxide, It breathes out oxygen. That's pure science. It's biology, botany, whatever. But you just filter the smell out. And you mandate it. And that actually causes another industry of, there's like 2 filter companies out there for the industry now. Chances are Maine will come up with its own filtering company like they do their own salting companies and everything else that Maine does is, it's a very solvable problem. The smell itself is the least of the worry
Did you
in
have
all of this. But yeah, it stinks. But all you need to do is put a filter on it.
I was gonna ask regarding the filter, is that for just indoor cultivation or is this also outdoor?
That's what indoor. Outdoor.
I think Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, is outdoor where you were going with all this for outdoor growing?
Oh, no, outdoor, indoor, although in Maine, I would imagine most of it would be indoor growing, but that still affects soil, water, contaminants from pesticides and fertilizers, that sort of thing.
I think
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine in Maine there'd be, I don't know, I would grow this stuff, but I don't know with the climate in Maine would be that conducive to, maybe Will knows, that conducive to large outdoor grows.
We make it work, but it'll never be as good as California or Kentucky would be.
Right.
And all things considered, coastal airflow, it'd have to be a really big grow to be that big of a nuisance. Of which I would suggest that we move away from having 10,000 acre grows.
My only concern with the filters is that I would imagine that's fairly difficult to enforce just based on the proposed structure for how enforcement, it's one thing to require it in the ordinance and say, okay, and they put it in their plan, okay, we're gonna have it. But who's gonna make sure that filter gets changed and that, that filter continues to be used?
Every facility is supposed to be
Neighbors
inspected annually
complain.
By who?
by state inspection agencies.
Every restaurant in Maine is supposed to be inspected every year, and right now, we're lucky if that happens every other year.
True.
Well, and locally, you said neighbors, correct?
But-
Yeah.
Because
Squeaky
that
wheel gets
that
the
tends
grease,
to be
right?
the case.
That's
I
now.
all
want
of
my
these
restaurants
complaints
to
are
be
usually people
inspected,
growing
Would you
and-
agree, but squeaky
who
wheel gets
are-
the
who
grease.
And
feel-
we've been
who
squeaking
feel
that
like they
wheel.
have been,
Doesn't make a
like,
difference,
oh, I don't
yeah.
need to hide it
For 10
anymore,
years
it's
it's been
legal,
squeaking.
and so I'm gonna
What
put it in
Every
everybody's
restaurant.
face. And that's
Across the state.
basically
There's only
my
like 15
experience with
people
the
across the
filter,
state that
with the whole
inspect
smell thing, when I read
Yeah.
about it in the news.
True with the fire inspections
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Just bad
No,
on commercial
something's gonna go
properties.
wrong and somebody's gonna get in trouble.
Yep.
So-
But the way the marijuana works is that unless this state legislation allows a town to do filters, a town can't do it.
Does it?
Yeah, the
Can a town not
legislation,
put
the
those
legislation
parameters?
under, legislation under the recreational marijuana apportions regulatory powers fairly specifically between the state and a town. I think we need to research that and ask MMA, to see exactly what a town actually can do under that regulatory scheme and the rules being put out.
Well, at least
So you
for
don't actually know though.
I
well,
didn't say I didn't know, I
at
said that
least-
You
that there's
acted
a
like
lot
an
of.
authority.
Okay.
Hold on, I said there's a lot of
Max has a
specificity.
response.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, at least going full circle back to the purpose I was here for tonight, it did actually say in the requirements for having a medical marijuana dispensary and cultivation facility without limitation, cultivating, growing, processing, displaying, selling, storage shall be conducted in force, but it's supposed to be indoors and shall not be visible from outside. So I think in terms of requirements for cultivation, it was for the town, it was meant to be indoors for medical marijuana.
You're talking about the state legislation?
I am talking about what we have had on the books for 6 years.
Right, but that's under the old law, and I'm talking about recreational.
Okay, and that's where
I'm
and that's
not
why I'm
talking about
and
medical.
that's why I'm saying comparatively, we could have at least done that under medical. I don't know for recreation either, but
That's what I'm
And
asking.
I can say that there is a community in Western Maine where you had a marijuana business next door to a community center, and children in the community center complained of a smell because the ventilation for one building was right near the intake for the other building. And they were doing gymnastics, and they said the entire facility smelled like marijuana. So I don't think it's completely in the realm of of insanity to say that regardless if it's indoor or outdoor, there is a smell. As you said, there is a smell. There are things that probably can be done. Whether or not the town has the ability to write something into the ordinance, or if they have to create an odor ordinance, I don't know.
I'm really surprised that these companies haven't started lobbying. I mean, to be honest with you.
Someone
In general,
allowed to spend,
I mean,
someone
because they're
allowed
being-
like a
the
growing
filter
facility
companies,
right next to a community?
Why they're
center?
not lobbying the state,
Who
the
doesn't
state
allow it?
legislature.
What's
Exactly.
allowed?
There's nothing
To
to
form
nothing
laws.
prohibiting
say that
it.
it's not allowed.
You know, I mean, that's
How
their
is this?
living,
I
is
think
to
it was
make
run for it,
filters.
but I'm not
I had
sure.
heard
So,
the
Never
same
mind.
story.
for
I
the
had heard the same
marijuana
story.
industry.
Never mind.
So I'm just.
Oh, yeah.
And this was
that
when
there
it was
could
still
be
very
more
much the
lobbying
Wild
going
West.
on
And if
by
you don't
those
have anything
people,
on the books that
because it is
doesn't
a
allow it,
completely
then you have no way
fixable
of
problem. That's the
prohibiting it.
Yeah, I understand your grief.
And it's not a school,
But the smell is
so.
definitely.
Thank you.
No, but,
Well,
that's what-
anecdotally, can I add an anecdote?
Please, Chris.
Driving through Rockland, this is Chris. Driving through Rockland, which I don't go that often, but twice I've been in the car, in back of a car that's hotboxing, and it's like when they open the window. Thank God my window wasn't open. It's just like, so we need filters for people driving in their cars as well when they're
Well,
hotboxing.
technically, they shouldn't be smoking while driving
At all.
Well,
Right.
at all,
technically we know that.
or
But it-
drinking while they're driving.
But it still happens. They're not even supposed to be smoking cigarettes in a car if there's a child in the car, but it still happens.
Yeah.
And I think the
Yeah.
problem with all of these laws is that enforcement is challenging.
Yes, it's the.
Are these filters expensive? I would imagine there is a cost to them.
Relatively, but not enough to hugely impact your overall profit margin. It's
So do you know
conceivable
if
cost.
they did something like that in New York? Did they solve that problem in New York where the neighbors were getting headaches and the smell was so terrible? Did they resolve that, and how did they resolve it?
I don't know anything, but I would hope so, because it's not that big of a problem to fix.
Okay, so,
Okay, so-
so,
Anyway, to answer your question, I do not intend at this point in time to make any presentation to the select board,
okay.
so.
So far, it sounds like what we have is we have the two reports.
Mhm.
We have Chris, who's talking about wanting to make a report specifically regarding environmental impacts. Anything else?
I think what we were just talking about raises the issue of exactly what I was asking. What is the scope of this committee? Because other than us figuring out what we can do about LD 1539 and what it allows the town to regulate for, but we still have to come up with advisement to the town on subjects like that. You know, if we allowed an indoor growing facility of conventional means, I personally would recommend that we make sure that that growing facility is using proper water filtration, or else they're contaminating our water shed. We've yet to have discussions about that.
Well, yeah, I'm surprised that
We talked
I've
about it.
asked this
Yeah, we
question
did.
several times, and the state really isn't addressing the environmental impacts to the soil and water. I mean, it's kind of like nobody seems to think that might be alarming. So,
We
anyway.
just had all our regulatory committees kind of like completely abolished. So they're, I mean, for a regular farming, for any kind of regulations to what's happening to our water and soil, there's nobody's checking it right now. That's why we have E. coli breakouts with our lettuce. So, I mean, nobody's checking water and soil.
Are we in next steps, or?
I think we're in next steps, are we?
Well, my suggestion is that we've met well beyond a year. Our purview was never medical marijuana, as you've said many times. It was recreational. The town voted. I think we finally have a lot of work on both sides of this issue. I don't think we're ever going to come to an agreement. Right now, the question of, for example, what the town should do in terms of regulating recreational is premature, given that it's banned. So there's no real, unless the town were to vote to actually have recreational, there's really no it's premature to discuss what we would do if it were, because the town has said without limitation. In other words, there's no time, the vote was not time limited, it's in perpetuity until and unless that is reversed. And with respect to medical, which is not within our scope, I think actually that Max and Bill are really the real people that should actually deal with it, especially given what I heard from our chairman and the select board. I think that they've got it well in hand.
Who's
And it-
Bill?
Bill Napower and I are planning consultants for the town.
Oh,
We're not
okay.
hired through Julie, we're from a,
Right.
Okay, so,
But given that they, I think,
Planning
have a tremendous
organization.
yeah, pretty much.
grasp of the issue of the medical, and I was very impressed by what they said, and I think Bill corrected me in something I didn't understand. I think they have a great grasp of it. I think the select board understands it, and I think that unless and until we opt in again, I don't think it'd be premature to sit here and say, well, what would medical marijuana look like?
I mean, recreational.
Well, either, no, I'm moving from recreational to medical.
Yeah.
Because in effect, we have three things that are grandfathered,
Mhm.
and they're grandfathered in perpetuity unless the legislature changes its mind. And other than that, there's no other medical marijuana, except for the ambiguity of the dispensary, which will probably be eliminated. And therefore, and since these three are in operation, I don't know, and no
Well,
one's.
and the
gonna-
home caregivers.
Right, but we can't touch that.
Correct.
So therefore, it's beyond anybody's scope, and it's regulated by the state. We don't even know all the caregivers, and that's a state regulatory function.
Mhm.
So I think where we are is, except for those three storefronts and the caregivers, which we can't touch, that we probably are at an impasse. I think we should dissolve the committee. If the town later on says, well, we should have a new committee to think about if we did do something, which I don't know why we would, but I think we should dissolve it. I think we've had a good time. I think it's been a good discussion. You presented well, Jazz has, I think, we're where we are. And I don't think that continuing to have these meetings is going to yield some new illumination or luminosity that's going to be really justifying continuing to meet. And with Kate leaving, because she's been an exceptional moderator, that also concerns me. I think that then I think about the dynamic of the committee, I think it would also tend to break down. So I think her leaving in condition to everything else, I think says, this is it, tonight's it, and I would make a motion, which I like to have seconded,
I would second a motion.
that this is the last meeting, and that the second part of that, which I like seconded, is that you and we each independently, you and Chris and I would independently present to the select board at some determined time to say, this is what we came up with. And do it in an amicable fashion. I don't think there's no lack of amicability. We just disagree, which it happens all the time in politics.
Okay, so,
So I make that motion, I make that motion to have second, which is a different motion.
I do second that.
okay, so the
So
motion
it's-
is to dissolve the committee,
Mhm.
to,
Have three independent reports to the select board.
3 reports / presentations, and to, what was the third part?
No, that's it.
That was
That's
it?
That was it.
To the select board. Okay, and we have a second.
Right here.
Okay, so now we have discussion.
I think that's a very good idea, because I do think that at some point, we're just rehashing in different semantics the same issues that we really have, that have been really
Talked about
addressed.
before.
Yeah, they've really been addressed very well. And, I think the select board will undoubtedly have some questions, which would, maybe prompt some further investigation, but I think we've got something that's very cohesive on both sides of the coin, that they can extrapolate what they want from it.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I mean, I completely agree with y'all that, or Chris?
I think the committee should be dissolved. I think I agree that we're just kind of at an impasse. It's pretty clear how each person feels, and I think everybody's done a good job. And with Kate leaving, who's a great person to to bring us together, but also to keep things in check. So I agree. Let's vote on it. Go ahead.
I'd like to make a statement. I can agree that we're certainly at an impasse on contradictory views, but I feel that it would be premature to completely dissolve the committee. I feel that not having some kind of baseline of recommendation for implementation would be really a shame should implementation be voted on and it just go through. With anything, any product hitting the market, lots of research is done before it ever touches the public hands, but we're talking about pretty much just letting it roll. And, all things of the current report to the side, I feel that what has been done on that is done. But that if we could put our heads together on what is best for the people in the town of Waldoboro as far as zoning, regulations, everything that could impact people in their daily lives would not be a bad idea.
Well, I can address that, but I don't think anybody likes, because there seems to be such a rush. I'm a wait and see. Let everybody else figure out what the problems are, what the real data is, and wait till they've figured it all out and incurred the expenses and the mistakes of others. And I wish our town would just say, you know what, we're going to wait 3 years, and then in 3 years we'll revisit this see how everybody else is doing and how they've ironed things out. But that on both sides, both sides could agree on that, what is best for everybody. And I think both sides would benefit from waiting. And I've asked before, what's the big rush? Why can't we just wait until we see what the data is from these other states, the problem and expenses in regulating? Route 1's still going to be there. Waldoboro's still going to be here. And why we can't wait, I don't know why we can't.
I guess I don't understand what you mean by waiting for what? In what context?
Waiting because there's a lot of problems involved as states are dealing with the legalization of this product and getting the data in. It's like, why reinvent the wheel? Why don't we wait until those people have already tried to problem solve the different things that would come up, the different questions, see how they've dealt with it, and then say, you know what, this is what worked for Colorado, or this is what worked for Massachusetts. That's a great idea. Why don't we do that?
So municipalities in Maine, some of them are moving forward and fast to say we are opting in and we'll figure it out as we go along. And I think, Chris, what you're saying is, over time, those in the industry are probably going to learn a lot, and those municipalities are going to learn a lot, and perhaps a prudent approach would be to suggest or recommend to the select board that Waldoboro not necessarily be part of that experiment, but rather benefit from the experience of others. And is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm sorry I wasn't so clear.
No, I just wanted to make sure I understood.
So, Chris,
Yes.
this is Will. I completely agree with your conservative point of view on that behalf. But I still understand it as a 180-day moratorium, which means that twice a year we get to try to change this. And twice a year people can pull together to try to come into a town meeting to vote that through. Am I wrong in that understanding?
Well, the moratorium is only being put in place for the dispensary because that's the only thing we have in our language regarding medical marijuana. Recreation marijuana
Is that a ban?
was banned in June, if I recall.
Okay, so it's full-on ban.
Full-on
There's
ban.
Okay.
We would
Okay,
have-
Never mind then.
Yeah, we would have to opt into that.
Did you have a comment?
Oh, I was just saying, but, we have the benefit of a year of some very well-articulated positions in this group, which, fortunately because of their hard work, they've committed those to, what in some ways are diametrically opposed positions, but in some ways probably have some elements of complementary position. I think at this point, and I still think that we probably are doing nothing particularly more beneficial by having things sort of languish on when, we've got something that we can provide to them and allow them to look at it and say, these are intelligent people. We don't always agree with them, but on the select board, but, they'll come back to us and say, well, how did you, what was your theory here? What is the support for your theory? But I think at this point, where we have had the benefit of a year of, continuous input, that I think.
More than a year.
Yeah, I think
It's
it's.
been more than a year.
Yeah, more than a year. I think it's probably, and I absolutely agree with Freeman. I mean, I think we've reached that point where it's probably, just as well served that, we can't sort of just create this ongoing project for ourselves. So that's my thought about it. I think Freeman's absolutely right that, we need to get something to them, and it's, a lot of work went into these 2 reports.
Did you have a comment?
Several now. The one thing about waiting for everybody else to kind of go through and find out what the problems are and their solutions and things, and then, acting after all of that. One is missing opportunities, economic opportunities, business, things that could happen here could bring money into Waldoboro. And the other is, Waldoboro is different from many of these other communities. We are not Damascotta. So what they're finding as their problems are not necessarily gonna be the same kind of problems that we have. And so we wait 3 years, then we decide to do it, we find out, oh, well, we do have a unique situation, so we're gonna still go through some of the same problems we would have had whether we started it now or wait 3, 4, 5 years. And those were my 2 points.
Okay, thank you. So from my perspective, I definitely agree we are at an impasse. I don't think that there's much more we could add to the dialogue that we haven't already covered in so many discussions that we've had. I do see your point, Will, about the idea that if the town decides to opt in at some point in the future, is all of our work for naught if we don't have a mechanism in place to say, well, hold on a second, now that we've opted in, maybe what we can do is one of our recommendations to the select board is that if or when the town does opt in, that we highly recommend that before implementation, before ordinances are written in zoning and regulations, that a committee is reconvened, and highly recommend that members of that committee include people from this committee. Or at least that there's some mechanism to make sure that everything that we did talk about and everything we learned is somehow shared before that implementation goes into effect. Does that sound like a good compromise without?
At a minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah. My
Um,
greatest fear is that should something happen like that and Philip Morris move up, they're doing it all over the country.
Yeah.
And then if we're gonna be real about it, yeah, that's some jobs, minimum wage. It's gonna be far more draw on our town and impact on our ecosystem.
Okay, so, in terms of reporting to the select board, we can obviously share the written reports with them. How does the group feel about a verbal report? Like going to a select board meeting and
Terrifies me.
each side gets 5 minutes or anything or would you rather? I would recommend for both reports having a cover page with like 10 key points.
Yeah, there should be an executive summary.
Yeah,
Oh,
something
yeah.
something that's a little bit, like everything that is kind of most essential rising to the top. Just to kind of, the reports are very different. And I would say, 10 key points on the top, or an executive summary, however you want to think about it, something that makes it a little bit easier for the select board members to digest.
I would suggest it be a verbal presentation, brief, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, and because I think after, this long period of time, several years, that they would want to at least see the participants, see you for the last time, and, I think that's right. We should just figure out which date works for the select board. Maybe sometime in March, early April.
You don't think next week?
Why not?
It would be,
Well, next week.
it would be fresh.
Because that meeting's already jam-packed.
Yeah.
I saw
Oh,
the
okay.
agenda today.
You got to get on
So-
the agenda.
Can we vote, because?
Yes.
Is that possible?
So, okay, so
You got somewhere to go?
can we
Yeah.
adjust the motion a little bit to save, the 3 reports, 2 written, unless, Chris, you're dying to write up a thesis on the environmental impacts of marijuana.
No, I like your idea of the cover report with 10 key points, and then if I can get my act together, maybe a presentation of some sort.
We can go to the select board and ask for some time on agenda. I would say let's cap it at 10-minute stops, so keep it short. And I am willing to participate in that. And with that being a key recommendation, that the committee was not able to come to any consensus. However, the one thing that we can agree on is that should the town ever opt in, that we highly recommend reconvening the committee, making sure that what we learned, what we discussed is somehow carried on.
I second that.
Okay,
Okay, so we're good with those amendments to the motion?
please.
They're on the record,
Okay.
wherever the camera is, so
Yeah, you got it, yeah.
can we vote?
Yes.
All in favor? Chris, you're gonna have to.
Aye, yes.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed? 1
Actually,
opposed.
with that, you didn't vote?
I abstain.
Okay, so 4, 1, and 1.
Motion passes? Okay.
It's your committee, I'm not.
I don't know Robert's rules very well, so, okay. Anything else? So we have our next steps.
Yeah.
I will reach out to Julie and request a time. Freeman, if you could send me kind of the final copy of your
I will.
report. Will, if you could send me a final copy of
I
your
did.
report, I know, but with the
Oh,
executive summary or key
gotcha.
points. And Chris, if you wanna put together some key points and/or questions, I don't expect
Okay.
that you'll have, a ton of research or anything, but you could have, considerations.
Right.
And I will let you know when Julie thinks we can get on an agenda,
I move that the meeting be ended.
okay?
I'll
Seconded.
second that too.
Okay?
Okay, thank you so much, too.
And
Thank you.
very
Well, I
much
picked the
for
wrong
that.
time to
No.
resign.
I gotta go.
Uh,
You were fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very